Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you for checking out my video. This is questions from comments number 25. There has been a dramatic uptick in questions being submitted, so I am going to read as much of the questions as I can, though some of them were really comprehensive, which I want to encourage you to do. But I'm not going to be able to read the entirety of the question here. You can always go back to the previous episode in these instances, questions from comments 24, if you want to read the complete questions. And I'll also put as much of them as I can in the description below. This video is chaptered, so if you want to skip around, you can hover over the timeline, but I'd appreciate it if you'd watch all of it. There's some really juicy tidbits in here because the questions were really sweet, and I'm quite keen to dive in. So thanks for being here. Thanks if you've chosen to subscribe. First question. Hey Jeff, 2 quick questions. So really 2 questions in the first question. With some of the faster, that just brings a smile to my face. With some of the faster drills, how defined are the individual notes meant to be? Sometimes it feels like I'm just gliding between notes. And their second question, most of your videos are called warm-ups. How do they differentiate from singing practice? So answer to your first question, focus more on the continuity of the airflow. Your accuracy will improve over time. What you are really learning to do in those fast-paced exercises is to keep the subglottic air pressure consistent over the long duration of all of those changing pitches. And as you cultivate release of the mechanism, it will adapt more quickly to the pitches that you are meant to be singing in the exercise. So that gliding in between pitches is the residual effects of trying to quote-unquote place the pitches somewhere. In reality, to cultivate release of the vocal mechanism is to say that we want to consciously not try to control what's happening here. We want to have a firm concept of the pitch that we want to sing. We want to cultivate the engagement, the subglottic air pressure, and cultivate the release of this mechanism because it will adapt more quickly and more precisely to the intended pitch than you would be able to place it muscularly. When the muscles get out of the way more and more, which is to say that it's balanced between airflow and muscle engagement, that's when we really get great accuracy. We can sing those really fast, agile lines. Our intonation, tone, basically everything improves out of this. And that's why you will rarely hear me use the word placement when it comes to pitches, because the fundamental notion of placing it somewhere is, in my opinion, a self-defeating way of thinking about it. All of what I just said is doubly true above the secondo passaggio and as you continue to mount the various registers of your voice. In other words, the higher you go, the more release you have to cultivate, the more you must cultivate engagement and the preparation of said pitches here, the more you must have a firm aural concept. Your ear training comes into play as well. Your second question is rather astute. There is no difference. And I would suggest that when you read about, the comments, and many of you are very, very gracious in the comments, and I really appreciate it. And you'll see in the comments how effective these things can be, and that's because they're vocalizations. The warm-ups are vocal exercises, and I put the vowels in particular orders, using particular scale patterns to try to help you, the vocalist, get good vowel alignment and good performance from your voice. The patterns and the ways of approaching the exercises I have grown into over decades and decades of hearing vocalists, listening to them, and building exercises for them to help them work on the pitfalls that they are encountering. And all of that is in the warm-ups too. So they are vocalizations. They can certainly be used to warm up for your day of singing, but they are technical exercises too. Thanks, great questions, very astute. Hey Jeff, if belting isn't healthy or worthwhile, especially in a long run due to its abrasive harsh nature, as believed by many vocal coaches, i.e. stretching or pulling of chest voice, what other ways are viable or applicable to belt in a healthy way? I've heard numerous times from various vocal coaches that belting is actually an alternative for mixed voice, meaning that you belt in an area where mixed voice should be developed. If that's the case, then after developing a strong mixed voice, first can we belt with mixed voice? Thanks, Jeff. Your videos have been really helpful. This topic is unfortunately overcomplicated because the way that you can go through a variety of different vocal coaches and teachers on YouTube or in the real world, in real life, and you will get different definitions for each of these things. The most important thing to consider when you are having a discussion around belting or mixed voice and how they work, how they're similar, how they're different, if they're similar at all, because to some people they are, is to know the context from which they are coming. The only, and even this is, like I was going to say, there's only one point in your question where I feel like I have to say, no, those two things are inconsistent. But actually, I can think of an example of someone's teaching where it would be consistent to suggest that. And so even then, you have to understand the context. So here's my context. Now, this I got from reading and studying Richard Miller's teachings on vocalizations, phonations, the usage of the human voice. First, the definition of belting. To belt is to enter the call of the voice. More specifically, it is to commit to using only the thyroarytenoid dominant singing muscles, or the vocalis muscle if you prefer. Those can be used interchangeably. We're talking about the same group of muscles. These are the muscles that, for the most part, control your chest voice. So the way that I am speaking to you right now, when I sing here, that is my thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. I am overabundantly using my vocalis muscles to do that. That is my chest voice. Those three things are synonymous. To belt is to only use that group of muscles. In other words, we are going to eliminate the possibility of other muscle groups influencing the way that the vocal fold is functioning. There are at least two examples that I can think of online that talk about belting, but talk about lengthening or thinning the vocal folds. That is an inconsistent concept, because in order to lengthen the vocal fold or to thin it, which is what happens when it lengthens longitudinally, you have to allow the cricothyroid muscles to engage. And this is the posterior and anterior cricothyroid muscles. There's two at each end of the vocal fold. And when they elongate, you get a longer vocal fold. It can stay closed or adducted, and you get that transition into your head voice. But when done properly, or I should say expertly, then it doesn't sound the way that we think of head voice. This is further complicated by the fact that many people use falsetto tone production and head voice synonymously too. So you can see we're very quickly getting into the weeds. With anyone that you want to talk about with this subject, get a framework for their understanding of the mechanisms. The one point I mentioned, there was one point in your question where I said, well, that's inconsistent. And if I've explained these muscles, and I realize there's a lot of muscle names and a lot of technical terms in there, hopefully you see the inconsistency once you weed through all of the jargon, which is that you can't belt with mixed voice because they are not, they don't really work together. To belt, by the definitions of Richard Miller and what I accept in my teachings, is to only use the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice musculature, only the vocalis muscles. To mix, we must allow the cricothyroid muscles to engage, the quote-unquote head voice muscles, if you like. By allowing that elongation, we are no longer only using the vocalis muscles, hence we can't belt with mixed voice. A lot of the rest of your question, however, is subjective, and there's one guide point that I would suggest to you. In terms of subjectivity, you said, isn't healthy or worthwhile? That's hotly debated. And I think that you can probably do some belting and still stay healthy. As for the worthwhile aspect of it, that's not for me to decide. That's up for you to decide artistically. You might need to do those things in order to do the kind of expressive movements or vocalizations that you need in the repertoire, the songs that you are singing. And if that is the case, who am I to suggest otherwise? Now, if you're always injured and you want to find a way to mitigate that, well, now we can start a discussion and we can start thinking about how we might be able to save the belting for certain points of maximum impact, but use a really well-executed voce piena in testa other times. When it comes to belting, I generally recommend that if you feel that you want to incorporate that into your performances, stick to a major second above the secondo passaggio. This does mean having to go through the process of accurately determining where your secondo passaggio is. The secondo passaggio is the word that you'll read in vocal books for the break. And if you've watched my other videos before, you'll know I don't talk about the break as the break, because your voice isn't broken. You're not broken. It's a passage. It's a registration event. It's a change of musculature. And we get the break because we're too heavy on the thyroarytenoid muscles, and the cricothyroids can't elongate the vocal fold. And so you get that really hard and fast flip into what is a falsetto tone production that, again, is all too frequently thought of as head voice. So stick to a major second above the secondo passaggio. Use belting as a flavor in addition to all the other flavors that will become available to you when you develop the ability to make a seamless transition over the secondo passaggio. And what do I mean by that? That right there is about where my secondo passaggio is. I feel like it's really in the cracks. It's not really F, it's not really F sharp for me. And if I sing this and I make incremental changes as I approach the secondo passaggio and continue to increase my subglottic air pressure and cultivate release, in other words, thinking about the pitches I want to sing as opposed to trying to force my voice to go to them, then I can make these incremental changes and make my way across the secondo passaggio quite effectively, such that the casual listener will have no idea that there is a registration event there. I'm going to have a sip of water because I've already been talking too much. And the last thing I want to do is demonstrate a vocalization with the way that, well, you get the idea. I edited out the drinking because no one should have to listen to me, gurgling away down here. Anyway, here's A major. As I get closer and closer to that F and F sharp, it's really all throughout that area from starting around middle C, C sharp here. I'm just making incremental changes across those pitches, coming up to the secondo passaggio. And if I do my job right, I can keep going and you won't really hear the transition. My secondo passaggio is right there. But again, if I've done my job right, I am making incremental changes. I am going from my chest voice to my head voice, but the sound remains mostly consistent. I've been talking a lot, so I'm a little bit more fatigued than I might be if I were only singing, but you get the idea. We do that, then we get this nice transition, and we have a lot more flexibility in how we use our voices. Too frequently, people think about head voice as this. It's very hollow sounding, and that in truth is the beginning stages of it. But even more so is we get this falsetto tone production here, where the vocal folds just separate entirely, and that sometimes gets referred to as falsetto when it's really falsetto tone production because the falsetto range is higher up. It can also be called head voice. It all gets very, very confusing. I didn't want to get too much into the weeds of this, but I feel very passionate about this subject and I want to help people understand so that they can get better high note function from their voices. So I hope this helps. Great question. If you've got any follow-ups, The comments is the place to be. Hello, Jeff. I wonder if you could talk a bit about finding your voice and owning it without getting envious of people who can sing higher or lower, or trying to imitate your favorite singers, or even singing roles in the wrong repertoire and potentially damaging your voice just because you can't accept what you've been given and wish to sound different. So that's a fairly heavy question. And there are certainly aspects of that when I speak to them, I feel like I'm mostly speaking to myself, which is that there's a bit of an internal soul searching that if you want to get past this, or at least work with it more effectively, you're going to have to look inside quite a bit, perhaps, in order to get there. You have perhaps heard me refer to my internal negative dialogue. I refer to it as the saboteur. And this is the kind of negative crosstalk and backlash that comes at me when I'm doing performances, or even, quite frankly, getting ready to shoot these videos some days. And a lot of the days, honestly. And I work very diligently to step beyond it, to set it aside. This includes strategies like taking a pause. Yes, I can hear what you are saying to me, saboteur. I'm going to set you aside for a moment and keep on doing this, and then we can talk about it later. Things like that, so inserting the pause. In terms of, and maybe dialing this in, being a bit more specific regarding singing and vocalists, because that internal journey, that is one, I think, for another helper like me. Yes, I have a lot of personal experience with this. Yes, I have worked with individuals in private lessons and instruction and working on performance anxiety and shepherding through these kinds of things. But without getting to know more about what's going on for you specifically, I don't feel like I can speak to it quite as effectively. When it comes to envying singers, I'm not so sure that ever really stops. I can listen to there's all sorts of vocalists that I listen to and admire and love their voices. I suppose it stops short of me wishing to be them, because after as much time as I've spent singing and performing and doing what I do, I have an appreciation and a love for what my voice can do. Yet, I always want to be able to do more. I'd always like to be a little bit more of fill in the blank, X, Y, Z, what I happen to be working on at the time. For me, most of my goals focus around the secondo passaggio. That's what I feel very passionate about. That's what I'm always looking for ever greater consistency and function over. And so when I hear a vocalist really killing it around there, I've got nothing but admiration. And perhaps that's an interesting observation. If you can look at those vocalists, listen to them even, and instead of saying that you are envious of them, turn your dialogue into, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that their voice can do that. And it is. It's wonderful that that's out there in the world. And then go back to your vocalizations and your repertoire and work towards that. But also look at the things that you can already do. If you're not recording yourself very frequently, you might consider doing that more often. But consider spending more time in the recording process. Do a recording. Listen to it. Work out the little problem spots on your piano or away from the recording. Record it again. Do it again. Go through this process. Find out what it feels like to work a part to where you are satisfied with it, and then see how you feel about your vocal performance. If you are primarily doing covers and you want to put some separation between yourself and the original artists, change the key, change the tempo, reharmonize it, or just add some passing chords and things like that. You don't have to rework the entirety of the tune, transpose it. That's a very easy way to just move things around. Like, or I guess I did say change the key. I don't know if I did or not. Change the key or transpose it. Make subtle adjustments to the melody line. That is a time-honored tradition in the jazz idiom. Now, I realize we're singing popular music here, but if you think of a Sarah Bareilles, for example, she does some amazingly compelling covers, and she frequently makes adjustments to the vocal melodies aside from transposition to accommodate her vocal range. In other words, she is changing the actual sequence of notes, all things being equal. She's singing a different melody. I mean, yes, but it's very minor little adjustments. Make it your own. Those are some ways to put some distance between yourself and the original artist. And it can shed some light on the things that you do differently, that perhaps you do particularly well, and can maybe give you a path forward into that recording process and the process of growing an appreciation for your vocal gifts. Because I don't necessarily know you or your voice, but I know there's only one of you, and there's only one of your voice. So find a path forward. Put these things to the side, or if that's not possible, find the manipulations to the repertoire so that you find out your strong suits and bring those to the forefront again and again and again, and know that there's only one of you, only one of your voice. And I'd like to hear it anyways. I'd love to see it on YouTube. And if you post something, drop a link in one of the comments so I can have a listen or something to that effect. All right. This next question is really quite long, so I'm going to skim through this here. It's coffee related. I love coffee. Especially related to singers. Okay, I'm just going to read it. Thank you for your high quality videos. You're very welcome. I was wondering something. What are you thinking about coffee, especially with milk, for singers? Do you consume it, and how does drinking coffee with milk daily, how can it affect our voices? It's one thing that I can't seem to give up, but lately I feel like it's holding me back from making my voice better. I feel constant fullness and discomfort on my throat. I do your lip trill exercises daily, then my voice feels a lot freer, but the next day I'm right back where I started. My voice is very raspy. I wonder if it's coffee or milk or both. There are lots of different explanations out there about this topic, but I was wondering your thoughts. I really enjoyed your video where you made ginger tea. That was like something that I make when I'm sick. It's really nice and soothing, all that. But for some reason I can't give up coffee with milk. Drink it twice a day. And I'm really curious about the effects on vocal cords. Thank you in advance for your answer. Okay, so, all right. Just because you do the lip trills on Monday doesn't mean you don't have to do them on Tuesday. So it shouldn't surprise you that you have to warm up from day to day to day. That's kind of just what it is to be a musician. You have to keep practicing, otherwise things happen. Now the raspiness is another issue. Speaking of raspiness, let's stay hydrated, shall we? Again, I edit out the glugging. Case in point, stay hydrated. If you're drinking coffee, now I drink coffee too. I have 2 cups a day. That's it. There's differing opinions on this. At the end of the day, if you determine that it is in fact the coffee that is messing up your voice, then you have to make your list of priorities there and decide which is more important. Now, I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that you have to make that determination. How would you do that? You could try eliminating it for a week and see what happens. It's not going to change the whole lip trills one day and then I wake up the next day and I'm back where I started. That you got to keep practicing. It's not like you do the exercise once and then you're good. You have to keep practicing. So put that out of your mind, or know that practice is a daily thing for musicians. That's what we have to do. There are 2 verbs for us: play and practice. And ideally, practice is kind of a subset of play, it's still kind of playing. Anyway, eliminate it, see if it changes anything. Or eliminate the milk. Some people are very sensitive to dairy when it comes to their voices. You might be one of those people. If you are, maybe eliminate all the rest of your dairy. If you have dairy in any other forms, cheese, dairy. Sorry, I can't think of another example besides cheese. Yogurt, there you go. Eliminate the other dairy, but keep it in the coffee, and see if that has an impact. If you're having the coffee and then immediately singing, put a little space in there. Also, put some water in there too, in that space. See if that helps. The heat from coffee is more likely than anything else in that particular beverage to be upsetting your vocal folds. So if you can, maybe let it cool a little bit so it's not super, super hot. One of the things that I do with my coffee is I do allow it to cool for a couple minutes before I drink it. I drink just straight up filter coffee black. There is another consideration, which is that coffee is acidic. I do not know exactly how acidic it is. I suspect that it varies from the beans and the way that you prepare it. If you are particularly sensitive to acids, then that could be upsetting your vocal folds a little bit. Also, if you suffer from acid reflux, it could all just be kind of compiling on top of itself and making it worse. So all of these things you have to consider. The fastest way to make this determination is to do an elimination of it for, like I said, a week. I would honestly, a week at the very least, and just see what you get, see if there's any difference, and then work it back in. You could also, if that seems untenable, you could just have your coffee at whenever you have it, but then put some time, say not less than an hour to an hour and a half, in between the consumption of coffee and your vocalization practice, and see if that helps you. You may also consider the way that you use your voice, the ranges that you are singing in, and the facility and agility that you require. The more sort of high performance machine you want to have access to, then you may find that it's not just coffee, it's a variety of other things that you may need to in fact curtail in your day-to-day life. But start with maybe a little bit of an elimination if you can, just as an experiment. You can go back and then see where it gets you. Again, if that's too much, then start with time. Put some time and hydration in between it. Let it cool a little bit. If you do a bit of research and find out like there's low acid or lower acidic versions of coffee, you might try that too. Okay, so this question is actually to me and to all of us. So you might also answer this question in the comments. Not sure how to word it. Sometimes when I'm singing or recording vocals, for a moment I feel like I'm breathing in, yet sounds are going out. I practice good breathing every day. I think that was meant to be every, by the way. So I am using breath poster and exercise, LOL. I think that might have been meant to be posture, but I'm not sure. Sometimes I stop and breathe in and out just to check in with my body, start focusing on adding as much airflow as I can because the sensation is so weird. Anyone ever had this? Well, of course, feelings are subjective, so your physical description may or may not be exactly what my experience is. But if you are practicing appoggio, that word means to lean, which is to say to lean into the air column. Too frequently, and I've been guilty of this in the past, but you won't have heard me say this more recently. Too frequently, we talk about ascending scales and using more airflow. And unfortunately, that's not exactly right. That is a fast and easy way for vocal teachers to suggest to a vocalist what they would do to increase their facility as they ascend. The thing of it is that high notes or ascending lines, like lines that go up the scales, are more, the requirement is more on an increase in subglottic air pressure. Yes, the flow of air does increase, but it is not nearly as much as we generally talk about it as. It doesn't start billowing out of us or anything like that. It is more about the subglottic air pressure and cultivating that suspension. So apagio practitioners will talk about leaning into the air column or suspending it. And if you were to ask me what it feels like when I am singing my best, I would tell you that I feel more like I am being rung like a bell. I don't feel like a bellows. I don't feel like I'm squeezing air out of myself or like I'm a fire hose or any of these other things. I feel like a bell where there is a sort of space around me that is energized. And my person is in this intimate relationship with the pressure around me. We're kind of hovering together in time. And when I'm phrasing, there are minute changes in the column of air that allow air to come in. And when I turn the phrase back around and I begin to apply more subglottic air pressure such that voice is emanating from me, it is still all in consort with this space around me. I realize that is super oovy groovy, but that's kind of where these discussions go when you're talking about what it is to lean into the air column. So while I don't know that I would describe my experience as being exactly the same, I feel that I can resonate, pun intended, with it, like a bell, bing. I feel like I can resonate with what you're saying. And it does feel that way when you are maintaining good lateral expansion, when the musculature in the core of the body is engaged and lifting towards the sternum, so it's preventing the diaphragm from lifting and thereby collapsing the air column. Like it's all working together in this big, beautiful, vibratory, bell-like structure in my musician's mind. I hope that helps. I always love your questions. Thank you so much. Do consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you've got any follow-ups, please post them in the comments or questions for Questions from Comments 26. Thanks again. Have a lovely day. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.